The evening rain painted the streets of Seattle in silver streaks as Ethan Parker waited by the window. The clock on the wall ticked past 8, and the apartment was filled with the soft hum of the city outside. He had cooked dinner, nothing fancy, just pasta and garlic bread. Her favorites, but it was getting cold. Ethan stared at his phone again. No message from Lily. Lately, she had been coming home late, always with a new excuse. A meeting, a gallery event, a sudden project. He tried to believe her. After all, she worked hard. But a quiet unease had started to grow in him like a shadow he couldn't explain, when the key finally turned in the lock. Ethan's chest loosened with relief. He stood ready to greet her, maybe even tease her for being late again. But the moment the door opened, everything inside him froze. Lily stepped in, her coat soaked from the rain. But she wasn't alone. A tall man followed right behind her, holding an umbrella and giving her a smile that seemed too comfortable, too familiar. Ethan's heartbeat quickened, not from anger, but from confusion. His eyes darted between them as water dripped from their coats onto the wooden floor. Lily looked startled to see Ethan standing there, as if she hadn't expected him to be home. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. "You're home early," he forced a polite smile. "It's Thursday, Lil. I'm always home early." The stranger stepped forward and extended his hand. "Hi, I'm Noah," he said warmly. "Sorry for dropping by like this. The rain was coming down hard, and Lily offered me a ride." Ethan shook his hand. It was firm, confident. "Nice to meet you," he said, though the words felt heavy in his throat. For a brief moment, silence hung in the air. Lily brushed her wet hair back and smiled nervously. "Noah's been helping me with a project at the gallery. I told him he could wait here for his ride." "Sure," Ethan replied, trying to keep his tone steady. "Of course." He noticed small details, the way Lily glanced at Noah before speaking. How she fiddled with the strap of her purse like she was buying time. He wasn't the jealous type, never had been, but tonight something about her felt distant, like she was standing next to him, but already somewhere else. Lily disappeared into the kitchen, leaving Ethan and Noah in the living room. The stranger looked around the apartment, admiring the art on the walls. "You've got a great place," Noah said casually. "Feels warm." Ethan nodded, eyes fixed on the rain outside. "Yeah, we've made it home over the years." He wanted to sound relaxed, but there was a tremor in his voice he couldn't hide. When Lily returned with tea, she sat a little too far from Ethan and a little too close to Noah. They talked about art, the upcoming exhibition, and the late nights preparing for it. Ethan listened, feeling like an outsider in his own home. The way she spoke to no animated. Aleve reminded him of how she used to talk to him when they first met. He noticed the spark in her eyes. It's that rare excitement he hadn't seen in months. It wasn't wrong. She wasn't doing anything inappropriate. But it was the kind of closeness that spoke quietly more than words ever could. Eventually, Noah checked his phone and stood. "I should get going." "Thanks for the tea. I'll walk you to the door," Lily offered quickly. Ethan's chest tightened, but he stayed seated. From the couch, he watched them talk in low voices by the doorway, saw her smile softly before saying goodbye. When she closed the door behind him, she didn't turn around right away. She just stood there, still and quiet. Ethan finally broke the silence. "He seems nice." Lily nodded, slipping off her coat. "He is. He's been a big help lately," Ethan forced a chuckle. "You've mentioned him before." She hesitated. "Maybe once or twice. We've been working on the gallery's winter show together." Her tone was calm, but something in her eyes flickered a tiny flash of guilt, or maybe just exhaustion. Ethan didn't press. He wanted to believe it was nothing more than work, that his worries were just imagination. But inside, a question began to form. One that scared him to even think. Was his wife drifting away from him? He hadn't noticed until now. Lily walked past him to the kitchen, saying something about reheating dinner. Ethan stood there, watching her move around the space they had built together, the same space that now felt slightly foreign. The distance between them wasn't measured in steps. But in silence, he remembered the early years, the long drives, the late-night laughter. The way she used to rest her head on his shoulder when watching old movies. Now, they barely touched. They barely even looked at each other the same way. As she placed a plate in front of him, he smiled faintly. "You must be tired," he said gently. She nodded without meeting his eyes. "It's been a long week." They ate quietly. The rain outside softened, the thunder faded, and the city's lights reflected off the wet pavement below. Everything around them looked peaceful. Yet Ethan's heart was far from it. He wanted to ask her the truth, why she looked happier around another man. Why she seemed to avoid his touch, but fear held him back. What if asking the question meant hearing an answer he couldn't handle? After dinner, Lily said she was going to take a shower. Ethan nodded, pretending to read something on his phone. But as soon as she closed the bathroom door, he let out a long, shaky breath. The scent of her perfume lingered in the air, a fragrance that used to comfort him, now only reminded him of how distant she'd become. He walked to the window again, watching the city lights blur through the raindrops. His reflection in the glass looked older than he remembered, tired, uncertain. The love he and Lily once shared was still there. He knew it. But tonight, for the first time, he wasn't sure if it was strong enough to keep them together. When the bathroom door opened, he turned. Lily came out wearing her soft gray sweater, the one he'd bought her years ago. For a moment, she looked like the woman he fell in love with, gentle, warm, familiar. But then her phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at it quickly, her lips pressing together before she flipped it over. Ethan didn't ask who it was. He just smiled faintly and said, "You should rest. Long day tomorrow." She nodded. "Good night, Ethan," as she disappeared into the bedroom. Ethan stayed in the living room, staring at the empty doorway. The rain had stopped, but inside him, the storm had only begun. Something had changed forever, and though he couldn't name it yet, he could feel it. Deep down, Ethan knew that the night Lily walked in wasn't just another rainy evening. It was the beginning of the truth he had been trying so hard not to see. The next morning, Ethan woke up to an empty side of the bed. Lily had already left for work, leaving behind only a note on the kitchen counter that said, "Early meeting at the gallery. Don't wait up for lunch." He stared at the short message, feeling an ache he couldn't quite name. It wasn't anger, it was distance, quiet and growing. He tried to distract himself with work. But all day his mind kept drifting back to the man who'd walked into their home the night before. Noah, the stranger with the calm smile and easy charm. Ethan hated that he couldn't stop thinking about him. Not because of jealousy exactly, but because of what Noah represented, a version of Lily's world that no longer included him. When Lily returned home that evening, she looked exhausted but oddly content. Her eyes glowed in a way he hadn't seen in months. Ethan wanted to ask how her day went, to bring back the warmth they once shared, but his words came out awkward. "How was work?" She smiled faintly. "Busy, but good. We finally got the lighting set up for the exhibit." Noah helped with some of the final details. There was again his name. Ethan nodded, forcing a small grin. "That's great." She talked for a few more minutes about the upcoming show, her voice full of life. Ethan listened, but every mention of Noah made his stomach twist. He wasn't angry at her for talking about him. What hurt was how easily she did. As if she didn't notice how distant it made her sound. Days turned into weeks. And the name Noah became a regular part of their conversations. He wasn't just a coworker anymore. He was someone she saw almost every day. Someone she laughed with. Someone she seemed to admire. Ethan noticed how often her phone buzzed. Now quick messages that made her smile softly before she tucked it away. One Saturday afternoon, Ethan decided to surprise her by stopping by the gallery. He brought her favorite coffee, hoping it would be a nice gesture. But when he walked in, he saw her across the room with Noah. They were hanging art pieces together, laughing about something, their movements easy and comfortable. She didn't see Ethan right away, and in that unguarded moment, he saw something that pierced his hardest spark. He turned to leave, but her voice caught him. Ethan smiled weakly. "Hey, thought I'd bring you coffee." She hurried over, wiping her hands on her apron. "That's so sweet of you." she said, taking the cup. Noah approached and greeted him politely, that same warm smile on his face. "Good to see you again," he said. "Yeah," Ethan replied. Likewise. Lily introduced them properly this time, but the tension was thick. Noah tried to ease it, talking about the exhibit, how talented Lily was, and how lucky the gallery was to have her. Ethan nodded along, but his chest burned with something heavy on ache, made of love. Fear and quiet loss. That evening, as they drove home, the silence in the car was louder than any argument. Lily stared out the window while Ethan gripped the steering wheel, replaying the image of her laughter with Noah. Finally, he said softly, "You seem happy lately." She turned her head. "Is that a bad thing?" He shook his head. "No, of course not. He hesitated. You smile differently these days." Her face softened with guilt. "Ethan, don't do that. Noah's just a friend. We work well together, that's all." He wanted to believe her. He wanted to erase the doubt growing inside him. "I know," he said quietly. "I just miss us, that's all." She didn't respond. Eyes drifted back to the window, lost somewhere he couldn't reach. Over the next week, Ethan tried harder. He cooked dinner, bought her flowers, even suggested a weekend getaway. But every effort felt one-sided. Lily was polite, grateful even, but distracted. Her phone kept lighting up late at night. When Ethan asked who it was, she would smile faintly and say, "Just work." One night, he walked into the living room to find her on a video call. She ended it quickly when she saw him. "That was Noah," she said before he could ask. "We're finalizing the layout for tomorrow." Ethan nodded, his throat tight. "You two seem close," she sighed. "He's just been there for me lately." "You've been busy too, Ethan." The words hit him harder than he expected. He realized she was right. He had been busy. Somewhere between deadlines and responsibilities, he had stopped noticing her loneliness. But still, something about the way she said it felt final. Like an invisible wall had been built between them. That weekend, the gallery's winter exhibition opened. Ethan attended, standing quietly in the corner as Lily floated from guest to guest. She looked stunning in her black dress, confident and graceful. Noah stood nearby, always within her orbit, offering small smiles and quiet support. When Lily finally reached Ethan, she looked surprised to see him there. "You came." "Course," he said softly. "Wouldn't miss it." They talked for a few minutes, but her attention kept drifting to Noah, who was helping someone adjust a painting. Ethan could see it clearly. Now the connection between them wasn't physical, but emotional. It was something deeper, something that scared him more than any affair could. Later that night, after the event, they drove home in near silence. When they entered the apartment, Lily sat on the couch. Her heels kicked off, exhaustion all over her face. Ethan sat beside her, waiting for her to speak. Finally, she whispered, "Ethan, we need to talk." His stomach dropped. "About what?" "About us," she said softly. "I feel like we're pretending everything's okay, but it's not." He stayed silent, staring at the floor. She took a breath. "I care about you so much, but I can't ignore what I'm feeling anymore. I've changed, and maybe we both have." Ethan's voice broke slightly. "Are you saying you don't love me?" Tears filled her eyes. "I still love you, Ethan, just not in the same way. I don't know what's happening to me. Noah's not the reason, but he made me realize how disconnected I've been, how disconnected we've been." Her honesty felt like both a wound and a relief. She wasn't blaming him. She was confessing something she'd tried to hide for too long. Ethan leaned back, struggling to breathe evenly. "So what now?" "I don't know," she whispered. "But I think we need to stop pretending before we break each other completely." The room fell silent. Outside, the city lights flickered softly against the rain-streaked windows. It wasn't the dramatic ending Ethan feared, it was quieter, stiller. He looked at her, realizing that love doesn't always end with shouting or betrayal. Sometimes it ends with two people sitting side by side, finally admitting that they've lost their way. And as the rain began to fall again, Ethan understood something painful but true. Sometimes the hardest part of love isn't letting go. It's realizing that the person sitting beside you isn't the same one who once held your heart. The morning after their painful talk, the air in the apartment felt different, quieter, heavier. Ethan woke up to the sound of soft rain tapping the window again, but this time Lily wasn't in bed. The smell of coffee filled the room, and he found her sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the steam rising from her cup. She looked tired, like she hadn't slept at all. He wanted to say something. Anything that could take back the hurt from the night before, but words felt useless. "Morning," he said softly. She gave him a small nod. "Morning." They sat across from each other in silence for a while. The distance between them wasn't just emotional anymore, it was visible. A space filled with things they hadn't said for months. Finally, Ethan spoke. "You said last night that you feel disconnected. When did that start?" Lily sighed, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I don't know exactly. Maybe it started when we stopped talking about real things. You were busy, I was busy, and we just drifted." Ethan leaned back, his chest tightening. "I thought that was normal. I thought every couple goes through quiet phases." "They do," she said gently. "But we never came out of ours." If you wanted to argue, to tell her that he had always been there for her, but deep down, he knew she was right. Somewhere between work, bills, and responsibilities, he had stopped noticing her laughter fading, her eyes dimming. He thought stability meant everything was fine. But she had been slowly disappearing inside their own life. "Did Noah make you realize that?" he asked, his voice calm but trembling underneath. Lily looked down at her hands. "He reminded me what it felt like to be seen again. But, Ethan, this isn't about him. It's about me. About us." The honesty in her voice hurt more than anger ever could. She wasn't confessing betrayal, she was confessing emptiness. Ethan rubbed his temples. "So what do we do now? Do we just walk away?" Tears filled her eyes. "I don't know. I don't want to hurt you, Ethan. You've been good to me. But I can't pretend I'm the same person I was when we got married." Ethan looked at her, seeing both the woman he loved and the stranger she had become. "And what about love?" he asked quietly. "Does that just fade too?" She shook her head slowly. "Love doesn't fade. It changes. Sometimes it becomes something softer, something that doesn't fit the way it used to." The words sat between them like a truth they had both been avoiding. Later that day, Ethan went for a walk through the city. The drizzle had turned the streets glossy, reflecting lights from passing cars. Every corner reminded him of their past, where they'd had their first coffee, where she'd laughed until she cried, where they'd promised each other forever. Now those memories felt like echoes of a life that no longer existed. He ended up at the waterfront, staring at the gray waves. He thought about how love could survive so many storms, yet still quietly sink when no one noticed the small cracks forming. When he returned home that evening, Lily was packing some clothes into a small suitcase. She turned as he walked in, her eyes swollen from crying. "I'm going to stay with my sister for a few days," she said softly. "I think we both need space." Ethan nodded, his throat tight. "Yeah, maybe that's a good idea." She zipped the bag, paused, then looked at him one last time. "I don't want you to think this is goodbye. I just need to breathe, to understand what I really want." He forced a small smile. "I get it. Take your time." When she left, the sound of the door closing echoed through the apartment, louder than it should have. For the first time in years, Ethan was truly alone. The days that followed were slow. He went to work, came home, ate dinner in silence. He tried not to check his phone, but every vibration made his heart jump. Sometimes she texted short messages, polite and distant. "Hope you're eating okay. Okay? Don't forget your doctor's appointment. Okay?" Each one hurt more than silence because they sounded like messages from someone who cared, but no longer belonged to him. One evening, he sat down and wrote her a letter not to send, just to say everything he couldn't say out loud. He wrote about the little things he missed, her humming while cooking, her cold feet brushing his under the covers, her laugh that used to light up the dullest days. He realized he hadn't lost those things overnight. He had slowly let them slip away without fighting for them. 3 days later, Lily called. Her voice was soft but steadier. "Can I come by?" "Of course," he said quickly. When she arrived, she looked calm, almost peaceful. They sat together on the couch, both unsure where to start. Finally, she spoke. "Being away helped me think. I realized I'd been carrying too much guilt. I kept blaming myself for feeling lost, but I think we both forgot how to listen." Ethan nodded. "You're right. I should have noticed sooner. I just didn't want to believe we were breaking." "We aren't broken," she said quietly. "We're just tired, worn out from pretending everything's fine." Kay looked at her carefully. "So what do we do? Try again? Or let go?" She hesitated. "I want to try, but not like before. Not out of habit. Only if we both really mean it." He reached for her hand and she didn't pull away. The touch felt fragile but real, two people holding on to what was left, hoping it was enough. "I still love you, Lily," he said, "even when it hurts." Tears welled in her eyes. "And I still care about you, Ethan. I just need to find myself again. If we're meant to last, maybe we'll meet halfway." The honesty between them felt freeing. For once there were no fake smiles, no quiet resentment, just truth. That night, there she left again. Ethan sat by the window, watching the city lights shimmer across the wet streets. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, he wasn't afraid. He realized love wasn't just about staying. Sometimes it was about giving the other person room to breathe. Lily's absence hurt, but it also taught him something important, that love could exist even when two people were apart. Not as possession, but as understanding. A few days later, he received a message from her. The exhibit went great. "Thank you for understanding. I'll come by this weekend. Maybe we can talk." He smiled at the screen. Not a promise, but a possibility. Maybe this was how healing began, not with grand gestures, but with small moments of honesty and care. Ethan closed his eyes and thought back to the night she walked in with Noah. That night, he thought his world was ending, but now he saw it differently. That night wasn't the end, it was the truth stepping through the door. Asking to be seen. Love, he realized, wasn't always about holding tighter. Sometimes it was about letting each other rediscover who they were, so if they ever found their way back, it would be with open eyes, not blind hope. And with that quiet thought, Ethan finally breathed deeply for the first time in a long while. Weeks passed, and the silence in Ethan and Lily's apartment slowly became less heavy. Time had softened the sharp edges of their pain, leaving behind a quiet understanding. They still texted, sometimes short, polite exchanges about bills, errands, or the weather, but beneath those small words was something deeper, care that hadn't disappeared, just changed shape. Ethan had started walking every evening by the waterfront. It was his way to clear his mind, to make sense of what love meant when it no longer looked the way it used to. The cold Seattle air bit at his cheeks, but he didn't mind. He'd grown, used to the quiet, to the rhythm of the waves against the pier. For the first time in years, he had space to think, not about what went wrong, but about what he could still do right. One chilly Sunday afternoon, his phone buzzed. It was Lily. "Can we talk?" She wrote, "I'm outside." Ethan's heart jumped. He opened the door, and there she was, standing on the steps with her hair slightly windblown, a nervous smile on her face. She looked different, lighter somehow. He smiled softly. "Hey, stranger." She laughed quietly, stepping inside. "Hi, it feels strange being here again." They sat at the same kitchen table where everything had fallen apart weeks ago. But this time, the air felt calmer. Lily wrapped her hands around her coffee mug, her eyes drifting around the room. "You kept everything the same," she said. "Couldn't bring myself to change anything," Ethan replied. "It still feels like home." She smiled sadly. "I missed that word, home." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Lily sighed. "I've been thinking a lot since I left, about us, about me." I realized I was searching for something outside when what I really needed was to understand myself first. Ethan listened quietly, every word soaking into him like rain. "Did you find what you were looking for?" he asked. "Not everything," she said honestly, "but I found clarity. Noah helped me see parts of myself I had forgotten, but it wasn't about him. It was about what I had lost inside. I thought love meant feeling constant excitement. But now I understand it's about peace, about growing, even when things change." Ethan nodded, his throat tight. "I think I understand. I kept holding on to the version of us we used to be, not realizing people evolve. Maybe love isn't about staying the same, it's about changing together." Her eyes softened. "You always understood me, even when I didn't deserve it." He gave a small, tired smile. "You deserved more than I gave, Lily. I should have noticed sooner when you started slipping away." Tears filled her eyes. "Don't say that. We both made mistakes. We stopped talking, stopped trying. I should have told you I was lonely instead of pretending I wasn't." Ethan reached across the table and gently touched her hand. For a second, it felt like the old days, warm, familiar, safe. "So where do we go from here?" he asked. Lily took a deep breath. "I don't know if we can go back, Ethan, but maybe we don't have to. Maybe we can start new, whatever that means." He nodded slowly. "No promises, just honesty." "Exactly," she said with a faint smile. They spent the rest of the afternoon talking not about the past, but about simple things, the city, their favorite songs, the small details they'd forgotten to share in years of quiet distance. It felt natural, easy. When Lily finally stood to leave, Ethan walked her to the door. Outside, the air was cool and still. She turned to him, eyes shining under the porch light. "I'm glad we talked," she said softly. "It feels like a weight's been lifted." "Me too," he replied. "No matter what happens next, I just want you to be happy." She smiled. "You too, Ethan," as she walked down the steps. She turned once more, giving him that same look she used to give years ago, a look filled with affection, not regret. Then she got into her car and drove off, leaving behind the sound of rain beginning to fall again. Ethan stood there for a long time, watching the streetlights blur through the drizzle. For the first time, he didn't feel broken. He felt free. In the following weeks, their connection found a new rhythm. They weren't a couple anymore, but they weren't strangers either. They checked in once in a while, shared updates about work, sometimes even met for coffee. It's what's bittersweet, like holding a memory that didn't hurt anymore. Lily's art exhibit went on to become a success. Ethan attended quietly, standing in the back as she gave her speech. She spotted him in the crowd, smiled, and gave a small nod. It was a silent thank you for the years they shared, for the consistency, for the patience, and for the understanding that love doesn't always mean staying forever. After the event, she approached him. "You came," she said. "Of course," he replied. "You were amazing." She smiled. "I couldn't have done it without what we went through. It taught me what love really means." "And what's that?" he asked gently. "That it's not about possession," she said softly. "It's about freedom, about wishing the best for someone, even if they're no longer yours." Ethan looked at her, realizing he finally felt the same. "Then I guess we both learned something." They hugged, long, warm, genuine. It wasn't a goodbye. It was an understanding that some endings aren't sad, they're simply transformations. Months later, Ethan started painting again, something he hadn't done in years. Filts felt like therapy, a way to express what words couldn't. On his wall hung one of Lily's paintings, a small landscape she'd left behind. It reminded him of peace, not pain. Sometimes he still thought of her, but not with sadness. It's good of her laugh, her art, the way she taught him to see love in silence. He had finally realized that letting go didn't mean losing it, meant making room for something new. One evening, he stood by the window, watching the sunset melt into the horizon. The apartment was still the same, but it no longer felt empty. It felt alive again, like it was breathing with him. He smiled faintly, whispering to himself, maybe this is what comes after love. And in that quiet moment, Ethan knew that not every love story ends with two people walking away together. Some end with gratitude, with growth, and with hearts that finally understand that love isn't always about holding on. It's about learning when to let go with grace. That night, as rain began to fall once more over Seattle, Ethan didn't feel lonely. He felt whole. He had lost something, yes, but he had gained something greater, or deeper understanding of love, life, and the quiet strength of moving forward. Love, he realized, doesn't always stay in the same shape. Sometimes it changes. Form turning into friendship, respect, or simply a beautiful memory that reminds you who you were and who you became. And that, in its own way, is forever.